My name is Ren Hartley. I'm 40 years old, a project manager at a tech company, and I live in the suburbs of Houston, Texas, with my 7-year-old daughter, Nola. Before I begin, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to my story. Some stories change you forever. This is mine. My world collapsed on a quiet Saturday afternoon in late October 2022. Nola had just turned 7. For almost 3 years, it had been just the two of us. Her father, my husband, passed away from cancer, leaving behind silence where laughter used to live. I learned how to survive in pieces. I learned how to be both mother and father. And Nola, she became my reason for breathing. That afternoon, like so many others, we went to Memorial Park. She loved the swings, loved racing imaginary squirrels across the grass, loved telling me stories that didn't quite make sense but always ended with laughter. Watching her that day, something inside me softened. For the first time in a long while, I felt safe. Around 5 p.m., the sunlight dimmed into gold. I called her over. She slipped her small hand into mine, still talking about a squirrel she swore waved at her. And then, everything happened too fast. I heard an engine roar behind us. Not normal, not right. Instinct forced me to turn around. A black pickup truck was speeding directly onto the sidewalk. The driver was slumped over the wheel, out of control. I screamed. I showed Nola with every ounce of strength I had, but I wasn't fast enough. The truck clipped me and sent my daughter flying. I watched her small body lift into the air, time stretching into something unbearable before she hit the pavement with a sound I will hear for the rest of my life. The world stopped. I ran to her, knees scraping the asphalt, pain meaningless. Blood poured from the back of her head, staining the sidewalk red. She didn't move. I picked her up, shaking, checking for breath. "Call 911, I screamed, "please." Someone did. Someone else yelled that the driver had a stroke. I didn't care. All I could see was my daughter's face turning pale in my arms. The ambulance ride felt endless. I held Nola's hand and whispered nonstop, "Mommy's here. I'm here. Please stay with me." At Memorial Hermann Hospital, doctors rushed her away. A nurse stopped me at the ER doors. "We'll do everything we can," she said gently. Then the doors closed. 30 minutes later, Dr. Shepard came out. "Nola has a closed traumatic brain injury with internal bleeding," he said. "She needs emergency surgery immediately." My body went numb. I signed the consent form with hands I couldn't control. At 7 p.m., they took my daughter into surgery. I sat alone in a plastic chair, her dried blood still on my clothes. Then I called my mother. "Mom?" I said, voice breaking. "Nola's having emergency brain surgery. Please come." She promised they would. I believed her. I waited. An hour passed, then 2. By 10 p.m., no one came. Then I saw the text. "We're busy with something important. We'll come later." I didn't know yet that something important would change how I saw my family forever. The hospital at night has its own kind of cruelty. The fluorescent lights don't dim. The floors never stop squeaking. Machines beep in steady rhythms that make you feel like time is counting down, even when no one says it out loud. After Nola was taken into surgery, I didn't sit like a normal person. I perched on the edge of that cold plastic chair like if I leaned back, I'd fall apart completely. My phone stayed in my hand. My mother's text, "We're busy with something important," glowed on the screen like a slap mark. I reread it again and again, waiting for it to magically change into something else. "We're on our way. We're sorry. Tell Nola we love her." But it never did. I tried calling again, straight to voicemail, then my father. Ringing, ringing, nothing. My knees and elbows were still bleeding from the accident, but my body didn't register pain the way it should have. Trauma does this strange thing where it decides what matters, and the rest becomes background noise.
All that mattered was the door with the red sign. Operating room. Authorized personnel only. Every time someone walked by, I jumped. Every time a nurse came out, my heart slammed so hard I thought I'd vomit. At some point, I realized I was trembling so badly my teeth were clicking. I pressed my palms to my face, tried to breathe, tried to be the kind of mother Nola needed me to be, strong, steady, unbreakable. But the truth? I was terrified, not just of losing her. I was terrified of what would happen if she lived and remembered this, remembered that when she was cracked open on a surgical table, her grandparents were nowhere. Around 11 p.m., the operating room door finally opened. Dr. Shepard emerged with exhaustion carved deep into his face. But there was something else in his eyes, too, a small, cautious relief. I stood so fast my chair tipped backward. "Doctor?" He nodded. "The surgery was successful. We reduced the pressure, stopped the bleeding." My legs turned to water. Then he added, "But her condition is still serious. The next 72 hours are critical. If there are no complications, she'll recover gradually." I started crying right there, no dignity left to protect. It wasn't a pretty cry either. It was the ugly kind, the kind that comes from your chest like something ripping free. Can I see her?" I managed. "She's being moved to the ICU," he said. 15 minutes per hour. She needs complete rest." When I saw Nola in the ICU, I almost didn't recognize her. Her head was wrapped in thick white bandages. A breathing tube sat under her nose. Monitors blinked beside her like tiny guards, watching every heartbeat. She looked so small, so breakable. I pulled a chair close and took her hand. It was cold. I leaned down until my forehead touched her knuckles and whispered, "I'm here. Mommy's here. You're not alone, baby." And that was my night. 15 minutes with her, 45 minutes outside staring at the wall, then 15 minutes again, over and over until dawn. And not once did my parents show up. No calls, no texts, not even a "how is she?" By morning, my body felt hollow, like someone had scooped the inside of me out with a spoon. I stepped into the hallway to breathe, opened my phone out of habit, and scrolled mindlessly. And that's when I saw it. Facebook, my mother's page. At first, my brain didn't understand what it was seeing. I just stared like it was a foreign language. Photos, balloons, cake, people smiling, my mother's arm around my sister, and in the center of it all, my nephew Everett, 9 years old, sitting like a sulky prince at his throne. My mother's caption read, "Tonight our whole family threw a little party to cheer up my grandson, Everett. He only got second place in his school chess tournament, but to us, he's still our #1 champion. Keep going, sweetheart. Next time you'll win." My finger froze on the screen. My throat went tight because the timestamp said the pictures were posted at 9 p.m. 9 p.m., the exact hour my daughter's skull was open on a table. My family hadn't been busy with something important. They had been busy staging a pity party. I stared at the images until my vision blurred. The comments underneath were full of sympathy and encouragement. "Oh, poor Everett. He deserved first place. He's a winner in our hearts." Not a single mention of Nola, because no one knew, because my parents never told them, because it wasn't important enough to interrupt cake and balloons. Something inside me went very still. Not rage, not yet. It was worse than rage. It was clarity. A brutal truth I had been swallowing for years finally rose up and forced its way into daylight. In my parents' world, Nola and I were not the priority. We were not the golden branch of the family tree. We were the side limb they didn't bother watering. Around 8 a.m., Dr. Shepard returned to check Nola. His expression was less tense. "She's stabilized. She's past the most dangerous phase." Relief hit me so hard I nearly collapsed again. But then reality crept back in like cold water. "Nola will need to stay in the hospital at least 2 weeks," he continued. "Monitoring, recovery, rehab." I nodded, swallowing hard. My work phone buzzed with reminders. My calendar stared back at me like an accusation. I had a crucial meeting scheduled for Monday with Japanese partners. 8 months of work, a multi-million-dollar contract, the kind of meeting you don't miss unless the building is on fire. And my building, My life was on fire. I looked at Nola through the ICU glass. Then I made myself do something I hated. I called my mother again. This time she answered after a few rings, her voice groggy, like she'd just woken up from a pleasant night. "Ren, what is it?" I gripped the phone so tight my fingers hurt. "Nola made it through surgery," I said, forcing calm. "She's still unconscious, but she's stable." A pause. Then my mother exhaled in relief. "Well, that's good. If she's past the danger, you can relax now. Relax." My daughter was in intensive care with a bandaged skull and tubes in her nose, and my mother said, "Relax," like Nola had scraped her knee. I swallowed the anger like it was acid. "Mom," I said, voice tight, "Monday morning I have an important work meeting. I need you and Dad to come watch Nola for just 2 hours so I can take it without losing everything I've built." Silence. I heard muffled voices in the background, my father asking, "Who's that?" My mother whispered something back. Then she returned to the phone and her voice was colder than I've ever heard it. "We'll come later," she said. "Everett is still distraught." It felt like someone dumped ice down my spine. "What did you say?" I whispered. My father took the phone from her. His voice cut through sharp and irritated. "Don't speak to your mother that way. Everett has been crying all night because he lost. You're an adult, Ren. Handle your own child." My pulse roared in my ears. "Handle my own child?" I hissed. "My daughter is lying unconscious after brain surgery." "She's out of danger," my father snapped. "Everett needs support from the whole family right now." Support? The word landed like a joke, and something in me broke clean in half. "You know what?" I said, voice shaking, not with tears anymore. Something darker. "You've made it clear, loud and clear." My father scoffed. "Stop being dramatic." Then he hung up. I stared at my phone and I realized I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. So I called someone else, my boss. When Mr. Fletcher answered, I explained everything, my voice forced into professionalism, even as my world burned. There was silence on the other end. Then he said warmly but firmly, "Ren, your daughter had brain surgery and you're worried about a meeting?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. He continued, "I'm postponing it to next week. The partners will understand. Family comes first." My eyes stung. A man who paid me a salary showed more humanity than the people who raised me. After I hung up, I sat beside Nola's bed and stared at her bandaged head. Mr. Fletcher had said, "Family can't wait," but my parents had proven something else to them. Family was selective. That afternoon, there was a knock on the hospital door. 3 coworkers walked in carrying flowers, fruit, and a big pink teddy bear. They didn't have to, but they came anyway. And as I watched strangers show my daughter more care than her own grandparents, a quiet vow formed in my chest like stone. I would never let Nola be the one left behind again. 2 days later, Nola finally opened her eyes. She blinked slowly, confused, exhausted. Then she looked at me and whispered, "Mom?" I cried so hard I couldn't even answer at first. I kissed her forehead, careful of the bandages. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." Her gaze wandered around the room, searching, and then, in the smallest voice, she asked the question I had been dreading. "Mom, where's Grandma? Where's Grandpa? Why didn't they come?" Her words stabbed straight into my heart. I couldn't tell her the truth, not yet, so I lied. "They're busy, sweetheart. When they have time, they'll come." Nola nodded, but I saw it, a flicker of disappointment in her eyes. Even at 7, she understood absence. 5 days later, finally, my parents showed up, and they came for a reason that would turn my disappointment into something much worse.
5 days. That's how long it took them. 5 days after my daughter woke up from brain surgery. 5 days after I slept in a chair beside her bed, afraid to close my eyes. 5 days after they chose cake and balloons over a hospital hallway. I was feeding Nola a bowl of warm porridge when the door to the hospital room creaked open. I looked up. My parents stood there, empty-handed. No flowers, no fruit, no stuffed animal, not even a card. They looked like people who had stopped by on a casual errand. Nola's face lit up instantly when she saw them. "Grandma, Grandpa," she said weakly, her voice still fragile. "You came to see me." My chest tightened. My mother glanced at Nola once, just once, before turning to me. "Well," she said, her tone sharp with irritation, "look at her, she's fine. You made it sound like she was about to die." The spoon in my hand bent slightly as my grip tightened. I set the bowl down slowly, deliberately, because I didn't trust myself to speak while holding it. 5 days, I said quietly. Nola has been in this hospital for 5 days. That's the first thing you say? My father scoffed, folding his arms. "Kids get sick all the time, appendicitis or whatever. You're being dramatic." Appendicitis. I turned to him, disbelief flooding my face. "Did you read the messages I sent? She had a traumatic brain injury, internal bleeding. The doctors opened her skull to save her life." He shrugged. "She's sitting up eating now, isn't she?" Nola's eyes flicked between us, confused, afraid. I took a deep breath, lowering my voice for her sake. "Why are you here?" I asked flatly. My mother glanced around the room, then got to the point with shocking efficiency. "Darby and her husband are having some financial difficulties. They need $20,000 for Everett's private school tuition. We think you should help." The world tilted. I stood up so fast my chair screeched across the floor. "Are you serious?" I snapped. "My daughter is recovering from brain surgery, and you came here to ask for money?" My mother frowned like I was the inconvenience. "Lower your voice. There's no need to make such a scene." I laughed, not because it was funny, because it was insane. "I don't have the money, and even if I did, I wouldn't give it. I have hospital bills to worry about." My father's face darkened instantly. "How much do you make a year that you're acting this stingy with family?" That was it. Everything I had swallowed for years exploded. Where were you? 5 days ago, when my daughter was on the operating table, you were throwing a pity party for Everett because he lost a chess tournament. My mother raised her hand, like she might slap me. "How dare you speak to us like that? We gave birth to you." I stepped closer, eyes locked on hers. "And do you know your granddaughter almost died?" I shot back. "Do you know I sat here alone all night while you were smiling for Facebook?" My father slammed his hand on the table beside Nola's bed. "That's enough," he roared. "You're an ungrateful daughter." Nola flinched. She grabbed her teddy bear and started crying. Real, terrified sobs. My heart shattered. I rushed to her side, pulling her gently into my arms. "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here. You're safe." Then I looked up at my parents. My voice was low, cold. "Get out," I said. "Right now, don't ever come near my daughter again." My mother's face twisted with fury. "You'll regret this." My father sneered. "Without us, you're nothing." I didn't argue. I simply reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope I had prepared days earlier. I handed it to them. "This is a 30-day notice," I said evenly. "You are required to vacate my house." My mother's hands shook as she opened it. Her face drained of color as she read. You are evicting us?" she whispered. "Yes," I said. "That house is mine. I paid for it. I let you live there rent-free for 5 years. But you've made it clear, Nola and I aren't your family." My father lunged forward, his hand raised, but stopped when he saw my expression. 30 days, I repeated. "If you don't leave, the court will handle it." They stormed out. The door slammed. Nola clutched my shirt and looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. "Mom," she whispered, "are Grandma and Grandpa mad at you? Don't they love me?" I hugged her tighter, my voice breaking. "No, sweetheart, they're just busy." But even as I said it, I knew from that moment on, our lives would never include them again. The days after that confrontation passed in a strange, muted haze. Nola stayed in the hospital for another week. Slowly, carefully, she started to look like herself again. Her smile returned first, small and cautious, like she wasn't sure it was allowed yet. Then her appetite, then her endless questions about when she could go back to school, back to the park, back to being a kid who didn't know what hospital smelled like. But every time she laughed, I felt the weight of what had happened settle deeper into my bones. Because while my daughter was learning how to heal, my parents were pretending nothing had changed. They didn't call, they didn't apologize, they didn't ask how Nola was doing. And when the 30 days passed, they didn't leave the house. They continued living there as if the eviction notice was just another dramatic tantrum I'd eventually cool down from. That's when I understood something else. They didn't think I meant it. They had never taken me seriously before. Why start now? So I did exactly what I said I would do. I called my lawyer. She had already prepared everything: proof of ownership, bank records, the eviction notice, documentation of unpaid rent, and written confirmation that they had refused to vacate. 2 weeks later, the court approved the eviction. No drama, no emotion, just facts. And on the day it was enforced, I was there. I stood outside the house, my house, watching as police officers supervised my parents, carrying box after box onto the lawn. My mother's face was red and swollen from crying. My father's jaw was clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. They didn't look at me, not once. Neighbors peeked through curtains. A few whispered. Some pretended not to notice. What struck me the most was who wasn't there. My sister. Darby didn't come to help them move. She didn't offer them a place to stay. Later, I found out why. They had asked her, and she had refused. Her excuse? The house is too small. Everett needs a quiet environment to study. Even when they lost their home, Everett still came first. In the end, my parents rented a tiny apartment in an aging complex across town. $1,200 a month, no yard, no guest room, no space for denial. And just like that, they disappeared from my life. Nola was discharged shortly after. She came home wearing a protective helmet that made her look like a tiny astronaut. She hated it, but she wore it anyway, brave in the quiet way only children can be. Weeks turned into months, months into years. 3 years passed, and in those 3 years, my parents never reached out. Not on birthdays, not on holidays, not once. We lived like strangers in the same city, and somehow life went on. Nola recovered completely. No lasting damage, no learning delays, just a faint scar hidden beneath her hair, a reminder I never needed to see to remember. She grew into a bright, kind, resilient little girl, the kind who noticed when others were sad, the kind who shared without being asked. And me, I learned how to stop waiting for apologies that would never come. Then, a week ago, my phone rang. A number I hadn't seen in 3 years flashed on the screen. Mom. I stared at it for a long time, long enough for memories to flood back. Nola in the ICU. Facebook photos, cake and balloons. I finally answered. "Ren," my mother cried, panic cracking her voice. "Your father was in a car accident. He's at Memorial Hermann Hospital. Please come." My heart stung, just a little. After all, she was still my mother. "I'll be there," I said calmly. She sobbed with relief. "Thank you. We knew you wouldn't abandon us." I hung up. And then I sat there for a long time before I made my choice. I sat at the kitchen table long after I hung up the phone. "I'll be there." The words echoed in my head, hollow and unfinished. 3 years ago, I would have dropped everything, grabbed my keys, rushed out the door without thinking twice, because that's what daughters were supposed to do, because that's what family meant. But 3 years ago, I was still waiting for love that only moved in one direction. I looked toward the hallway where Nola's bedroom door was half open. She was sprawled across her bed, homework abandoned, humming to herself as she colored. Alive. Healthy. Here. The image of her bandaged head in the ICU flashed through my mind so sharply it stole my breath, and suddenly I knew. I stood up, but I didn't reach for my coat. That evening, instead of driving to the hospital, I took Nola somewhere special. We went to Papa's Brothers Steakhouse, one of the nicest restaurants in Houston, the kind of place my parents always said was too expensive whenever I suggested celebrating Nola's achievements. Tonight, there was something to celebrate. Nola had just been named top student in her class for the semester. She beamed the entire ride there, swinging her legs off the booth, proudly ordering her favorite steak and a fruit smoothie like it was the most natural thing in the world. We laughed. We talked about school, friends, summer plans. For a few hours, the past didn't exist. I took a few photos of us smiling over dinner. Then I posted them on Facebook. So proud of my daughter Nola for being top of her class this semester. Let's celebrate. I knew my mother still followed my page. I didn't have to wait long. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Mom. This time, her voice wasn't panicked. It was furious. "What are you doing?" she screamed. "Your father is in the emergency room and you're out eating like nothing happened?" I took a slow sip of water. 3 years ago, I said calmly, when Nola was in the operating room with her skull opened, where were you? Silence. "You were throwing a consolation party," I continued, "cheering up Everett because he lost a chess tournament." Her breathing grew heavy. "I'm just doing what you taught me," I finished. She broke down crying. "You're heartless," she sobbed. I hung up. Nola looked at me. "Mom, who was that?" I smiled. "Wrong number, sweetheart. Eat your dessert." The next morning, Mom called again. This time, there was no anger left, only desperation. "Your father's past the danger," she said shakily, "but insurance only covers 70%. We need $30,000 for surgery and treatment. Please, we have no one else." I listened, quietly, completely. When she finished, I said, "I'll think about it." Then I hung up. She called 5 more times that day. I didn't answer. Instead, I took Nola to the park, bought her ice cream, let her stay up late watching movies. That evening, after I tucked Nola into bed, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find my mother and Darby standing there. My mother pushed past me, tears streaming. "Ren, please," she begged, grabbing my hands. "I know you can afford it. We'll pay you back, I promise." Darby crossed her arms. "You're the daughter. You have an obligation. All our money goes to Everett's education." I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "What about the $100,000 trust fund you set up for Everett?" They froze. My mother stammered. You know about that?" "I do," I said. "What about Nola? Did you ever set anything aside for her?" My mother cried harder. Darby looked away. "Please," Mom whispered, "just this once." I gently pulled my hands free. "I won't pay the $30,000, I said. "Use Everett's trust fund." Darby exploded. "That money is for his future." I nodded. "Then this conversation is over." They left. At the door, my mother turned back one last time. "You'll be punished for this," she said bitterly. I met her gaze calmly. "Maybe, but my daughter will never feel what I felt." I closed the door. I didn't feel victorious, just done. Sometimes the strongest ending isn't revenge, it's choosing who matters and never apologizing for it.